Houston, we have so many problems we can't keep track of them. That's the new statement, not the old cliche that we've heard over the years. And here's a new one. And I'm a little bit hesitant to go all in response to this news because I really like Josh McCown. I think he's a great person. I think he's a greatly underrated quarterback, and I think he will eventually be a great NFL coach. But the news that he's been interviewed by the Texans to be their head coach with no coaching experience, with no sign that he's ready to be the head coach of anything above maybe mid-level college. I mean, he's played a long time, great. But this speaks to, and again, I say all this fully aware that Josh McCown can end up being a Super Bowl winning coach, and I will root for him when he is a head coach, not if, but when. But to have it happen now, amid all of the craziness, amid all of the dysfunction, amid all of the drama, at a time when everyone around the league is watching the Texans, Charean, and asking, is there any chance they get it? Something like this provides the answer. They don't. There is no institutional self-awareness. This is a middle finger by Jack Easterby. I almost did the actual gesture. This is a middle finger by Jack Easterby to the world that we're going to do whatever I can convince Cal McNair to do. That's how I read it.
Well, first, thank you for not getting us thrown off the air today and for the future. I appreciate that. Second of all, I don't know that the Texans know what the Texans are doing. Mike, I do not think this was for an actual head coaching job. I don't. Of course, it is the Texans, but I really
you got to
get
that message out there. If it's not, then you got to make it clear that he's not being interviewed for head coach.
No question. But I think they're down. I think we're going to see Eric Bieniemy, Leslie Frazier, or Matt Eberflus get this job. I really believe that. And I think you're going to see Josh McCown get the quarterback's job. I think he and Deshaun Watson hit it off. And they are falling behind, Mike, frankly, in the coaching search for assistant coaches, as it were, because all the other jobs have been filled and teams have changed assistant coaches. They're moving on. And so I think this was fully to be the quarterback's coach of this team. I don't think he's going to be the next Norm Van Brocklin to go straight from football into coaching. But again, Mike, it's the Texans, and they've screwed up pretty much everything over the last year and a half, or whatever it's been since they started making trades and doing dumb stuff, and it continues. So I don't know that the Texans know what they're doing, Mike.
Norm Van Brocklin, the original head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, and he and Fran Tarkenton hated each other, culminating in the trade that sent Tarkenton to the Giants before he was traded back to the Vikings. But look, okay, if Eberflus is the guy, why not just hire him? The Colts are done. You can hire him. You don't have to wait.
Yes.
Bieniemy or Frazier, you have to wait at least until after this weekend, if not 2 weeks and 3 days from now, the day after the Super Bowl. But who's interviewing him? If it is Bieniemy, if it is Frazier that's going to get the job and they're just waiting, don't they understand how stupid it looks that someone would be interviewing a position coach without the future head coach involved? This is Al Davis later years Raiders stuff, where they go out and hire the staff for you and you just come in and you take who they give you, and it really neuters the head coach before he's even walked through the door. And even if he's on board with it, it creates the perception that someone else is pulling the strings, not the head coach.
Oh, I think you're forgetting about someone, Mike. It was more recent than that. How about Jerry Jones hiring Jason Garrett for an unknown position before he hired Wade Phillips? And, of course, Jason Garrett was the head coach in waiting and ended up taking over for Wade Phillips. So, yes, that's exactly what ended up happening in Dallas. That's what Al Davis has done, and I think that's fully what the Texans are doing. And so if you're Eric Bieniemy or Leslie Frazier, do you say no to this job?
Well, I guess not, because I think if you're Frazier, you don't, because when's the window ever going to be open for you again, right? He's been a former head coach for 6-7 years now. As long as Mike Zimmer's been the coach of the Vikings, that's how long it's been since Leslie Frazier was a head coach. So you got to take what you can get when you can get it if you're him. If you're Bieniemy, I think you can still wait. And the key for Bieniemy is, I want to know Deshaun Watson is on board with me completely and totally before I would take that job. But I just think that it's a horrible perception for the Texans to interview Josh McCown and not make it clear that it's for something other than head coaching job. And there's no reason that anyone even has to know about this. It's not like they had to request permission from some other team to interview Josh McCown. And I don't know how the record keeping works, but I think there's probably a way to keep it secret that you talk to him, especially if you're not talking to him about being the head coach of the team. So the whole thing is odd to me, and it's not surprising because these are your Houston Texans, folks. And again, I love Josh McCown, and I think he'll be a great coach someday. But this is not the ideal way to enter the NFL as a coach, this idea that they're interviewing you as a head coach when you've never even served as an assistant coach at any level of football. You've just been a player since 2003. So I don't know where it goes from here, Charean. Clearly, Eric Bieniemy wants to be a head coach. Patrick Mahomes echoing today how crazy it is that Bieniemy doesn't have a job. I just think this news coming out at a time when everyone is saying, what about Bieniemy, what about Bieniemy? It just makes a weird situation even weirder.
Yeah, and I hope the Texans hire Eric Bieniemy. Alex Smith said yesterday, I think he called it ridiculous, and Patrick Mahomes today called it crazy, and it is. We all thought that Eric Bieniemy was going to be hired in this cycle, and unless the Texans do it, he won't be, and he's been passed over and passed over and passed over. And I don't know what it's going to take for Eric Bieniemy to get a head coaching job. And for those who say he doesn't interview well, that's all well and good. But you look at some of the head coaches who have done interviews, and we absolutely know they didn't interview well. That's not why Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a head coaching job. That's not a good excuse for not having him hired by somebody at some point over the last couple of years. So I really hope, Mike, that he ends up getting this job in Houston. I think the numbers then look better on minority coaches in this cycle. I mean, we've heard a lot about it since the Eagles made their hire. But I just think it's better for the team. I think he's going to be a really good head coach, and I think that's probably the best that the Texans can do in this hiring cycle is hire Eric Bieniemy. I think he'll be a success there if he gets that chance with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback, if that happens.
It was fear of imminent litigation filed by Johnny Cochran and Cyrus Mary in 2002 that prompted the NFL to implement the Rooney Rule. It will take, I believe, fear of imminent litigation or reality of actual litigation to change a situation that involves teams checking boxes and complying with the interview requirement, but not actually improving the numbers. There is a point where you don't need a smoking gun. You don't need a Donald Sterling tape to prove that there is a bias that is baked into the cake. The numbers prove it out. 70% of the players are black. 35% of the assistant coaches are black. And the percentage of head coaches who ultimately bubble up through the pipeline and become in charge of a team is so low that the numbers scream it out. And the more they go through the motions and ultimately, look, there's always going to be a white head coach who is qualified for every vacancy. There will always be one. And there is always a black head coach who is qualified for every vacancy. And it's like flipping a coin, Charean, and having it come up heads over and over and over and over again. There's a point where it's not coincidence. That's what the NFL is dealing with. And the other reality, these billionaires don't like to be told what to do. They don't like us telling them what to do. They don't like fans telling them what to do. They don't like anyone telling them what to do. And I think there's a certain element of stubbornness, not racial bias, just stubbornness that creeps into it.
Yeah, Mike, 4 minority coaches among the 31 that have head coaches right now, and that's just not good enough. It's not good enough by any team in this league. It's not good enough by the league, and it needs to change. And, you know, these incentives obviously haven't done much to push those numbers up. And hopefully in the future, in the next hiring cycle and the one after that, we do see better numbers. But I'm disappointed with what we've seen. Frankly, again, if the Texans hire Leslie Frazier or Eric Bieniemy, I think it looks much better. But if they don't, if they end up with a white head coach, here we go again. It's the same thing as we saw last hiring cycle and the one before that and the one before that.
I just wonder how much pressure is going to be placed on Cal McNair by the league office. And I wonder what will be dangled. We know that stuff happens behind the curtain. Will there be a Super Bowl awarded to Houston at some point down the road? as the quid pro quo. And hey, oh, that doesn't happen. Oh, okay, it doesn't happen.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.